¿Querés café?
Tengo 8, mamá.
Sí, tenemos abundante azúcar. Iris reportándose.
¿No te da miedo estar sola acá?
No, qué miedo. Tocás este botón y me llamás. ¿Ves esa cámara que hay allá? Acá te veo. Tranquila, no demores, ya venís. ¿Jugá?
Trancate bien, quédate tranquila.
Tata, amor. ¡Tata! ¿Dónde estás? ¿Qué te pasó? 32 segundos.
Ah, perdón, no me presenté. Soy Luis, sano. Estoy acá con mi esposa.
Hola, Mimi. Nos va a ayudar a traer a Raúl.
Está infectada, loco. Tu bebé también puede estar enfermo.
Está siendo cruel. Si Tata estuviera enferma, que vos la abandonarías.
¿Qué dijiste? ¿Cuándo te dije no? ¿Dónde está? Decime dónde está mi hija.
Hoy no es un día para asustarse con la locura.
La mamá ya está acá.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Fresh Cuts. This is Mike, and joining me as always is Mr. Venom. What's up, Venom? How are you?
Greetings and salutations, uncontrollable maniacs. I'm doing pretty well, Mike. How the hell is this Monday treating you?
It's treating the uncontrollable maniacs good, I hope. I'm more of a controllable maniac, you know.
That's boring.
Maybe well, you know, once it hits midnight, a little uncontrollableness takes over. But for the most part, if I'm on the clock, I guess I'm controllable.
Yeah, boring.
All right. Also with us, it's Don and Ellie. What's up, Don?
Yo, what's going on? Yeah, trying to control these urges, but they're only lasting for 30 seconds. I'm not sure why.
All right, and back for another episode. You should all be familiar with him. It's Derek. What's up, Derek?
Yo, what's going on, Michael?
Oh, man. Not a whole lot. Just another typical busy Monday. But we're here for Fresh Cuts like usual, so let's get into it. We are talking about a movie that hit Shudder a couple weeks ago. Just happened to come out on a week where we either already had something planned or theatrical. I don't even remember at this point. But it's called Virus 32, billed as a Shudder original. Of course, that probably just means they bought the rights. I don't think they made it. And it lists Argentina and Uruguay as a country of origin. I looked up not the synopsis on IMDb, but somewhere else where it listed like the city. Maybe it was the synopsis on Shudder itself, and it listed the city. Shudder. Okay, yeah, I looked up and I was curious because it sounded like, you know, Spanish of some kind of descent or South American, and it turns out that the city listed, I think it was like Montevideo or something like that.
Montevideo.
Yeah. Much better pronounced by Venom there. It is the capital of Uruguay, I think. Actually, I don't know if it's capital or just a city in Uruguay. So I was like, all right. So that kind of identified a little bit regionally for me. So I'll take the, I guess, synopsis off IMDb. Yes. A rapid spreading virus which transforms people into intelligent, ultraviolet, extra-fast zombie hunters. They should have left the word hunters off, but after each wave of attack by the monsters, they're left incapacitated for 32 seconds while they recover their strength. So, will that play into the movie? I would guess so, but it seems like a point to make that as part of the virus. But We'll get into more of that later. So let's start with our general thoughts. Virus 32, Venom, kick it off.
All right. Well, this movie has the unfortunate distinction of being watched after the sadness. And I think if you watch this movie after the sadness, you're not going to enjoy it as much. Now, I know I'm bringing up a movie that we have yet to review on this show. It gets its U.S. release actually this coming week, I believe, Thursday or Friday. It drops on Shudder finally.
12th, so I think that would be Thursday.
Thursday, okay. So most of us on this program have already seen it, as the German 4K Blu-ray has been out for over a month now. I know Don and myself and Mike all have it, or at the very least, Mike and I. A movie that was released last year in its native country, but obviously, we're getting a release this year. So why am I shouldn't talk so much about the sadness. That's next week's episode. So let me just shut the hell up about that. But let's just say this movie has a lot of similar points to the sadness. An undescribed virus kind of converting people into uncontrollable maniacs. If you want to call them zombies, you're welcome to. I tend to call them infected, as they are not reanimated corpses. Yes, I am one of those douchebags that doesn't like 28 Days Later being called a zombie movie. I understand why it is, and I'm not going to argue with anybody, but I'm one of those Romero purists. So aside from that, this is a very well-made movie. You can see its technical aspects, its cinematography. It's got a pretty good score. It's actually got a great score now that I think about it. It has some really cool songs in the film. Stuff like Baby Metal and what was the other song? Oh, there was a Queen song in there too, I believe, which was really cool. Like I said, your basic, infected horde movie. It's the beginning of the virus outbreak. You see people kind of how they're dealing with it. Obviously, we're not getting any kind of explanation. In fact, we get very little explanation as to what actually is happening. Just we know that there is a virus, and that if you catch said airborne virus, you turn into just an uncontrollable maniac. As I'm watching this film, because this film is actually a 2022 film, as I'm watching it, I'm thinking to myself, man, did somebody in Argentina see the sadness last year and just decide to kind of do their own version of it? Because, like I said, it feels a lot like it at multiple points. Even specific plot points in the film feel like they're lifted from the sadness. But I don't want to shit on this movie by any stretch. It's still a decent movie. It's a little bit slow for a zombie/infected movie. It's a little slow, a little lacking in the blood and the gore and the action set pieces. We get some cool set pieces here and there. I actually thought the opening credits sequence was really cool, which actually shows literally the beginning of the virus. And it's basically a drone shot flying around a city, very similar to the vampire attack in 30 Days of Night, where it's an overhead shot and just kind of looking down at everything that's happening. Same thing with this. We see an overhead drone shot, just seeing, some people walking on their way to work completely oblivious to what's about to happen. And then you'll turn a corner and then you'll see like two random people running, chasing another person, something like that. So I thought it was a really cool little sequence. The movie's imperfect in general. It's a well-made movie. It's good. I've already talked about some of the areas where it's lacking. Dialogue-wise, it's not exceptional. This is a Spanish film, and you guys know how I have my bias towards Spanish language horror. But even this one, like I said, it has the dubious distinction of coming, after a movie that's, once people see it, I think are, really going to gravitate towards that as opposed to this one. But if you're into slower paced zombie/infected films, especially when they don't have much of a resolution. I hate to say it, but I kind of hate the ending of this movie. It's not necessarily how the ending played out. It's just the fact that that's the ending they went with. Once again, for a zombie/infected movie, it was an odd choice on their part. I do understand why they kind of went there, but it just kind of seems like really odd that suddenly the movie ends here. We'll talk about that obviously in the spoiler section, but all in all, I did enjoy the movie. I don't want to make it sound like I'm being too negative. But like I said, ultimately this movie has the distinction of coming after the sadness, and I think, like I said, it's unfortunate because I think if I would have seen this movie first, I would have enjoyed it a little bit more. I would have praised a little bit more of its action. But, when you see something, like what we're going to review next week, this one just, and I kind of even named this episode The Sadness Now with Zero Sugar, because that's how it came off to me. It's the sadness light. I'll leave my general thoughts at that.
Okay, let's go over to Don. What are your general thoughts?
I'm pretty similar with Venom. I do see a lot of the similarities between this and Sadness. Uncontrollable virus outbreak. People stuck in a location trying to, survive against the creatures. A lot of the, the other points, again, not worth bringing up in the non-spoiler section, but it plays off very, very much like it. Not sure how that would work timeline-wise, just based on, when the Sadness came out versus when this came out. I mean, I don't know South American release, so I don't know for sure, but yeah, they do play pretty similar, which could be a coincidence, or it could just be, a direct influence because, I don't know the timeline between Sadness's, release down in Uruguay versus, when this would have been, when he would have seen it, when he would have put the idea into motion, when he would have gotten the funding, and then when he would have shot the film. It just feels like it just feels kind of like a weird kind of coincidence thing that they just so happen to be similar ideas at a similar time. But beyond that, it doesn't do anything extraordinarily well, but it is pretty cool. I do love. I will say this. I love the concept of how it plays the virus 32 into its title. I do like the way that comes off. It comes off, like I guess like a dose of creativity and uniqueness to it that you don't necessarily see too often. Like they're actually trying to do something different with how it, they're trying to do something different with the concept. That said, one of my biggest issues is just how flimsy and how lame in general they find that fact out. The whole idea of how they do that is one of the stupidest and most absolutely asinine ways I've ever seen it play out. How they realize this fact about the virus and all of that, it's just absolutely lame. Yeah, the ending is a little bit of a weak point. I feel like it kind of could have gone, several different directions, and they went with the schmaltziest one, which I'm kind of starting to lead towards Venom's more, bleaker zombie film endings. That one, the one that they chose here, it didn't really resonate as well. But yeah, in general, it's not a bad film. It's not necessarily a great one either. It's kind of middle of the road, but it's just like Venom said, it's just unfortunately overshadowed by just the fact that the Sadness did this 10 times better on what looked like an equivalent budget. I mean, they look pretty similar and something we'll talk about next week, but the fact that you see that one and you see this one and you see what they kind of did with similar results and the execution is 10 times better just kind of makes this one fall just a little bit. It's still watchable. It's still enjoyable. I still see a lot of people having fun with this one, but I think this one's going to get shut aside and Sadness is going to take its reins once people see what that one's like when it comes out Friday, or Thursday. But overall thoughts, enjoyable, watchable, but I got a feeling this is going to get lost in the shuffle just because it's unfortunately kind of generic in certain ways that just kind of render it just, another brick in the road, essentially.
All right, let's go over to Derek for general thoughts. What did you think?
Yeah, for somebody who has actually never seen The Sadness yet, this story's actually been done a few different fucking times in other movies. Even like the French movie The Horde's kind of like this movie, and yeah, It's kind of generic. I'll admit the story's been done, but there was some sequences I did enjoy in this movie. Like there's a sequence that involves a pool with some orange smoke. That's all I'll give away. But I never seen that because it added like this orange tinge to the film, and I'm used to seeing like blues and reds and greens usually, and orange was never used, and I kind of really dug that use of color there. That made this scene a little bit better. The characters, for the most part, I like the interactions between like the main girl and the crazy fucking dude that she meets later. Who I actually recognize from another Argentinian zombie movie, Phase 7. He was the main guy in that movie. Yeah, so, it's been done, and it actually, I'll bring it up when we get into more spoilers. Yeah, the ending, yeah, I kind of saw why they ended that way, but I can see why people wouldn't like that ending either, if that makes sense. It's kind of like that thing where, you see like this woman has a lot of fucking. I can see it ending down, but sometimes with these movies, I'm like, I don't always need zombie movies to end down. Even like fucking Day that or infected movies, even like 28 Days Later ended with a fucking happy end. Like fucking. But it's whatever, I'll take it for a grain of salt. Is it watchable? Yes. Did I hate myself watching it? No. Is everyone gonna love it? Maybe not. I don't know. But overall, I was okay with it.
Okay. Yeah, as far as I go, I liked it, quite a bit. Yeah, obviously, trying to compare to the sadness is, I'm trying not to go down that road because I did see the sadness recently too. That's just on a whole level by itself. I think this one takes a lot of cues from a movie like 28 Days Later. Like as I was watching it, I was like, man, they could have named this like Rage Virus Comes to Uruguay or something, because it definitely felt similar in a lot of ways. I did like the pool sequence Derek was referring to. I also liked there was a locker room sequence I thought was pretty cool, and I did like her encounter with someone in that facility, the kind of cat and mouse game they were playing and what was going on. Although I think this is another one of those movies where a lot of story elements in it, you will, if you're familiar with the genre, you'll recognize them from other movies. I think if anything, this movie does a lot of individual things well, a lot of individual sequences, scenes, side parts to it. But just as a movie overall, it's okay. I liked it. Probably I'm more along the lines of Derek. But it sounds like we all liked it to a certain extent. Like I don't think anyone here disliked it. I just think me and Derek maybe liked it a little bit more. But other than that, I was fine with it. I mean, considering like what we've been watching lately on Shudder, I think this is one of the better ones that they've dropped.
Oh yeah,
for
this
2022.
Yeah, this is 10 times better than Death Valley.
Oh God, yes.
Well, I kind of like Death Valley, but I was the outlier on that show.
Yeah, I like the creature. I wasn't a big fan of the movie.
Yeah, it was like a low skill Doom.
Yes.
Well, I
like
that Doom though.
Yeah.
Oh, I love Doom's a guilty pleasure. That's another show though.
Yeah.
I actually watched this the same night I watched The Cellar, which is to me The Cellar is like another similar thing where it's like it feels like
every
another
movie
retelling of the same thing you've seen 100 times.
So that would have been interesting because I utterly love The Cellar. If we were doing a top 10 of the year, Cellar would be on my top 10 of the year. I loved it.
Well,
so yeah,
I gotta watch it. Damn.
I didn't watch it yet, so I can't.
Yeah, I love The Cellar. I thought that one was a lot of fun. I mean, I will admit my one flaw is that it is kind of generic. But I loved it. I thought it was a lot of fun.
I just thought it was
Yeah,
great.
I mean, I didn't really think it was a bad movie. I didn't love it. I'll say that much.
I just thought it was weird that The Girl Next Door was an Irish movie.
Yes, it was nice to see her back because it seemed like for a while she was going to be like the next it girl and then just disappeared.
Yeah, didn't she, the last movie she disappeared in was Captivity? That masterpiece?
Yeah. I think so.
That one came out after House of Wax, right?
Yeah.
Pretty sure, yeah.
I thought so because I always get those two mixed up.
Ratings on the Cellar?
I would have given it a 9.
Oh,
Wow.
I would have given it a 9. So
Well, now I have to watch it.
yeah, now I gotta watch it now too. Thank you, Duff. It's on my list.
yeah, but I gave Sharknado a 10. So what does my ratings matter?
Hey, I gave Sharknado a 9. I don't care.
I gave
Yeah,
Ape
but I'm
versus Monster a 9.5.
Yeah, but I'm
Oh,
talking like a
stop it.
legitimate rating. I'm not talking like a shit rating.
No. Well,
I know.
shit rating for me. I love Sharknado unapologetically.
Well, I did
We all
too.
know
That's why I gave it a 10.
Anyway, back to our film.
Back to the asylum. No, I'm just kidding.
I think the whole 32-second of incapacitation after attack.
Spoiler.
Well, I think we kind of already mentioned it, didn't we?
No, we didn't. No, sir, we did not.
Are you sure? Maybe it was
No.
before we started recording. I don't know.
Yeah,
Possibly,
that's
Don was careful not to say anything.
All right.
Yeah,
Well, the title of the movie is Virus 32. So there. It's sorry you got spoiled. Whatever. I think it sets up some. It sets up a good sequence, I guess. I mean, there's a sequence where it really comes into play. I don't even think for most of the movie it matters so much, but
Well, there is one sequence. Like I'm saying, there is like one or two sequences that kind of like it was leading to earlier that give away the idea, but it's never really executed until the end. So
yeah. I like the concept of it, like, what the 32 represents. But it makes for some cool tension, but it also makes for some incredibly frustrating scenes. Like when they did it the second time with the daughter, I'm literally yelling at my fucking television. And I don't like having to yell at my television because people on the screen are being stupid. And, it's like, this, you know what is going on. You know how much time you have. Yet, let's dilly-dally. Let's fuck around a little bit. Let's sneak through this hallway. It's like, no, what is wrong with you? So, yeah, it's a cool plot point, but it definitely set up a little bit of frustration on my part.
And that poor cat.
Oh, dude, I can never let my wife watch this movie now. That was one of the most hardcore animal deaths I've seen on screen. And you still don't technically see it. I mean, you see bits and pieces of it. They did a really good job editing it, I thought, so that you don't actually get to see the hits, the actual contact. But the way that they were cutting it, it is very brutal.
Yeah, I don't think Mac will be able to watch this because he's a cat owner.
I mean, I may never watch this again because of that scene. I mean, like I said, that was a brutal, intense animal death that was almost unnecessary, as cool as it was, because I will absolutely admit that was cool as shit to watch, from a guilty pleasure standpoint. But yeah, as an animal lover, that was rough. That was really rough.
I was just shocked. My mouth just dropped. Like, what?
Yeah, a little bit.
Poor Mr. Pigglesworth.
Yeah, he was pretty vicious.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess to wrap up, I thought the movie was fine. Not great, not bad. It's fine. But if you're for me personally, if you're scrolling through the featured section on Shudder for 2022, this is probably one of the better ones, at least right now, to choose from. So I mean, take that for what it's worth, depending on how many other ones you've seen. If you're worried about having to take a chance on something else, I would say it's worth that much at least. So that's good for me. For general thoughts, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, the movie, I don't want to make it sound like I dislike the movie. I definitely enjoyed a lot of it. I agree with some of the set pieces that have already been talked about, the pool scene, the basement scene, or the cellar scene, whatever you want to go with. There's multiple great set pieces in here. Overall, this is a really, really good movie. It really is. I mean, legitimately a good film. Is it the most exciting zombie film out there? Probably not, which is why I'm saying that, if you're a fan of like the over the top violent, zombie slash horde movies like, an Army of the Dead or something like that, this one may not satisfy you because there's not a whole lot of death for a zombie movie. There's not a whole lot of killing. Definitely not a lot of human death in this one. You get, some zombie kills obviously here and there. But for the most part, I mean, it's a small group that we're following. I mean, it's like 2, 3, 4 people at the most at any point, I think, we're following in this movie. And which makes it it gives it that sense of isolation as opposed to being like, an Army of the Dead where you've got like a dozen, robbers with military training trying to go through this. These are all just normal people, working security at, some like Boys and Girls Club type facility. And so it makes for some pretty good tension, especially early on, like when that first infected gets into the building. It makes for a very tense scene. So the movie has a lot going for it. Like I said, I just don't think it's going to satisfy the gorehounds, especially when that's kind of what you expect from a zombie movie. We expect flesh to be rent from bones. We expect organs and intestines to be ripped out. That's just kind of what we expect, unless it's like some kind of art house zombie film, which this absolutely is not.
Like The Night Eats the World or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, exactly. If it's a movie with a major narrative that's got like a lot of subtext, that's okay. That's acceptable. Something like The Cured. I thought The Cured was like that as well. But most people going into a zombie movie, they're looking for death, destruction, apocalyptic scenarios, blah, blah, blah. And ultimately, this movie may not satisfy that need. So just go into it with a little bit of grain of salt, zombie fans. If you are a fan of those, over the top, ultra actiony, ultra violent zombie films, this isn't the one for you, but it's still very enjoyable if you are a fan of the subgenre, which I am. I am solidly a zombie movie fan. I still enjoyed this movie. I still think it's really good. I still think there's some good performances in here, some decent writing, some good plot points. Like I said, there's some frustrating moments later in the film, and even early in the film, there's 1 or 2 of my pet peeves that, again, I will go over with everyone. But overall, just a really good movie, just solid, well worth your time. If you can handle the subtitles, if you're not averse to watching foreign horror, and you've got a Shudder account or access to one, there's no reason not to check this out. But do it now because The Sadness comes out Thursday, and I think that's all we're going to be talking about for a little while after that comes out. I got a feeling Virus 32 is going to be left in the dust. So let's talk about it now.
Another one bites the dust.
Let's do it.
All right, folks. So that's your final spoiler warning. It's a zombie movie. I don't know how spoilery we can really get other than, a couple of plot points here and there and the specific reason for the title, Virus 32. So let's get into it. Our movie opens up with a quick cold open of an old couple. We see an old woman go to feed her bird. We see, and this scene is all one long shot. It's one of those dolly shots. She grabs the empty food bowl out of the bird's cage, and the bird is in the cage. She walks over to the kitchen, puts some food in the plate, walks back to the bird cage, which is literally right there at the kitchen entrance, and the bird is gone, and the door in the cage is open. What could have happened? So she goes around looking. She's calling out to her husband, who's in the living room. And finally, when the camera pans over to the living room, we see the husband sitting in his favorite chair with a glazed over look on his face. He's got blood coming from his mouth, and he is holding the bird that we just saw alive in the cage. It's very obviously dead. It's crushed. But the guy doesn't react. He doesn't react to his wife coming into the room. There is an explanation for that, which we'll get to later on. So at this point, the camera pans outside of the apartment and the opening credits start. And this is where we get the cool drone sequence I was talking about, where we've got a drone flying around different parts of Montevideo. And we see, like I said, we see things slowly start to turn. At first we see people, like I said, walking to work, just going about their everyday activities. But then suddenly you'll see one person running away, running out of a building. And then suddenly we'll turn another corner and we'll see like multiple people chasing down, one person for some reason. And at this point, we kind of know what kind of movie we're in for.
Yeah, and cars crashing into cars and shit.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, great little car accident. Ambulance crashing into a building. That was pretty cool. And that's pretty much the end of our cold open. At this point, we are introduced to what's our main character's name? I forgot.
Iris.
Iris, thank you. We are introduced to Iris. She is at her friend's apartment. I can only assume it's her friend's apartment because we do find out later that she is married. Potentially separated. Again, we don't get any real explanation, but for some reason, she's not with her husband on a work day, and her kid is also not with her, so there's got to be some kind of custody there. Anyway, point is, Iris is a security guard at a boys and girls club, one of those places that has basketball courts and swimming pools and just all sorts of activities for kids and families. She is, of course, late to work because she got into an argument with her husband about having to take care of her daughter, Miriam, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, dad shows up with daughter in tow, telling Iris that she needs to take care of her today because he has something important to do. She informs him, I'm working today. And the husband kind of looks at her and says, really, you're working today? And looks at her weird. No explanation as to why. It's odd that she's working today. Once again, we will find out here in a little bit. And she ends up, relenting and taking her daughter. She promises her husband, I won't take her to work with me. But what does she do? As soon as the husband's out of sight, she takes her daughter to work with her. Basically, like I said, it's like this big boys club type area. She ends up leaving her daughter in a abandoned basketball court that's got water on the floor. It looks like it's been flooded. Why she chose this room to leave her daughter while she goes to do her rounds is beyond me. But what do we see mom doing as soon as she leaves her daughter alone? She's smoking a joint. Yeah, so already we've established great parenthood and more than likely a wonderful future for this little girl. Hint, hint. Anyway. Of course, as mom is smoking her joint, she starts to hear noises. She starts looking out the window and she sees one man attack another. From her vantage point, she's too far away to be able to tell that there's anything wrong with either of the individuals. All she sees is one guy beat the shit out of another guy. And then the one guy who did the beating falls to his knees for, some time and just kind of sits there quietly. She's not sure what's going on. But then she realizes that there is something going on outside. There is some kind of epidemic. She notices more people, more kind of uncontrollable wild people out there running around. At one point she looks outside and she sees her buddy, the outside security guard. She's the inside security guard inside the building. She ends up looking outside to the outside security guard and realizes that he has been killed. And the perpetrator is basically standing above his body, just staring down at him. Once again, kind of an odd situation, but there it is. She realizes that someone is in the building. She's not sure how, but somewhere in the building, a window was left open, and we see through a security camera that a infected individual gets in there. Only one. It's not an entire horde, at least not yet. Hint, hint. And then we just get, various set pieces here and there with zombie attacks. We have one main infected antagonist in the movie. This is one of the major similarities with the Sadness that I couldn't really talk about in the spoiler-free section. The Sadness has one major antagonist that's followed throughout the film. This movie has the same thing. Even though it's a horde of infected out there, there is one particular one, and it's this one who got into the building first, who becomes like our big bad of the film, if you will, even though there are other infected that slowly start to trickle into the building. She ends up finding a gentleman who is also walking around the building. He's trying to hide out from the infected. This person, I forget his name. Oh, Luis. Yeah, Luis. There's only like 4 people in this movie. I can't believe I forgot names, but yeah, there it is. So Luis in Argentina decides, basically lets her know that he was able to figure something out. He was able to figure out that the infected can't swim. So there's a scene where he actually pushes her into a pool. At first it looks like he's attacking her. But then he pushes her into the pool. The infected who's chasing her follows her into the pool. Then we see Luis jump into the pool, grab Iris, and basically tells her to calm down. Just calm down and then look at the zombie. Now, this is all happening underwater. He's basically, doing the universal hand motions to calm down, and then he points at the infected, and what we see is the infected, struggling to try to get to his victim, but then after a while his movements slow, and then he just stops moving altogether. And of course that makes sense, because again, these are not zombies. These are actually living people with a virus. Obviously the virus makes them, wild, and they don't think about the swim lessons they got when they were 8. And as soon as they get into water, they just flail wildly until they drown. So, that's kind of a cool way to get out of it. So, of course, Luis and Iris start to hatch a plan to try to get to the marina, to try to get a boat and just kind of wait it out on the water. Again, we've seen many zombie movies do this before. This whole time, though, Iris is looking for her daughter, and Luis knows where she is. And Luis basically says, your daughter's safe. As soon as you help me take care of something, I will take you to where she is. Now, obviously, that's, very dubious. I mean, you've got this big burly guy telling this little petite redhead, your daughter's fine, but you need to help me do this thing first. And what is it that Iris needs to help Luis do? He needs to help his wife give birth. Yes, Luis's wife is very pregnant in the middle of a zombie apocalypse, and she is basically in labor and has to give birth. Now, Iris agrees, and they go to start walking back to the room where Luis locked his wife up to keep her safe. And lo and behold, she's a goddamn infected. Yes, she is basically tied to a wheelchair, and she's completely gone. Her eyes are completely red. Her teeth have mutated. She is just 100% infected. But of course, Luis plays the loving husband. It's kind of hard to buy it, considering the way Luis kind of treats Iris when they first meet. And ladies, I know I'm preaching to the choir here by saying this, but anytime a guy tells you that he's a good guy, he's 100% not a good guy. Any guy who feels the need to say it is not. And as soon as Luis is like, oh, no, this isn't me. I'm a good guy. I really am. Yeah. Yep. Sure you are, Luis. Anyway. Yes, Luis's undead wife, or infected wife, if you will, who is still very pregnant, he has to give birth to it because he's worried, of course, that the baby, could potentially catch the virus or, whatever. Iris obviously instantly is like, well, what if the baby's already dead? Like, what is the point of all this? Your wife is obviously infected. She calls him out on it, and he basically attacks her. He tries to strangle her. She grabs a knife, trying to get Luis to tell him where he hid her daughter. But Luis is not relenting. He's basically saying she's fine, she's safe, which, obviously in the back of all of our heads, we're like, oh shit, so, and they basically have to go and take care of the wife. Unfortunately, they don't want to do it in the room that she's currently locked in because she's making too much noise. Because as I said, she is an infected. She's screaming at the top of her goddamn lungs. So of course her mouth is gagged, but she's still screaming very loudly. Everything else. So they end up, and yes, my friends, they do end up having a birthing scene. The wife actually does end up giving birth to a child, to a CG monstrosity. I don't know, and maybe one of the co-hosts here could kind of chime in, but I couldn't tell what the fuck was going on with that baby. That was the biggest newborn I've ever seen. That baby looked like he was already 2 foot tall.
He was Chris Griffin.
That's why I thought he was already infected.
That's what I thought at first too.
That was my initial thought was based on the size. It's already infected. That whole thing was for naught, and then he would have to, shoot both him and the mother. I thought that would have been the original goal.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought.
Yeah, but they kind of hinted that it was going to happen because you skipped over the pool scene.
Oh no, I'll get to it.
No, because it happened when before the baby was born.
Right.
And the zombie was smelling the stomach because he knew that it was not infected. That's how they knew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I almost thought they were leading towards like the mom ripping her own kid out of her stomach.
Oh, that would have been interesting. So anyway, the baby is born, but before this, yes, there is the pool scene that we've all kind of praised already. Basically what happens is early in the film, Iris, for some ungodly reason, I don't know why, but she decides to steal some smoke grenades, some of those yellow smoke grenades, yellow, orange, whatever color you want to call that. And she puts them in her bag. Obviously, it's foreshadowing for later, but I still don't know why she decided to grab these smoke bombs. But,
you never
whatever.
know.
Convenient plot points are convenient. So let's just go with that. And then the pool scene. Basically, as they are transporting Luis's wife to a safer part of the facility, they get to the pool and they are basically Iris sees her husband and he's in the pool. The pool has no water in it, mind you. This is a different pool from the earlier scene where we saw the zombie drown. We see, I think Javi, I think was his name, and we see him. We recognize him from the scene earlier where he dropped off his daughter. He obviously has been attacked. He's bleeding profusely from the midsection. It's fairly obvious that he's about to die. Luckily, though, like I said, since this is a living, virus, it's not a reanimated corpse situation. So at least you don't have to worry about her husband popping back up as soon as he dies. So that's nice. But then they have a tender moment where he dies and they kind of have a little goodbye, which really doesn't play all that well because we spend no time with this husband. Like I said, I wasn't even sure it was her husband until after he dies and Luis asks her, was that your husband? Like they don't really, obviously they have a child together and obviously it seems like they don't live together, which would make it seem like a divorce or separation situation, or maybe they were never married,
No, I kind of know the backstory because I see it through the visuals of the movie. She tried to kill herself because she has scars on her hands when, Luis shows her to show her hands.
Right.
Because they lost a baby.
Yeah. Hadn't gotten to that yet. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I know.
Because that's all in the third act reveal when we finally get all the background information on Iris. But yeah. So like I said, they are surrounded by infected in the pool. The pool is not filled with water. They end up deciding to get into the pool, mind you, with no water in it, and set off all these smoke grenades. So basically, as the infected people are coming into the pool area through the outside entrances, all they see is smoke. They don't see anyone to attack. So at first, they're just kind of docile, just kind of walking around the pool area. Eventually, one of them does kind of bump into Luis and starts to attack Luis. Luis is able to defend himself. We get another situation where Iris trips over a pool noodle, and I love saying pool noodle, but anyway, I digress. She trips over the pool noodle and gets attacked instantly by an infected. It's about to basically, take a bite out of her, and Luis is able to fire his gun. Now, Luis does have a gun this entire time, but he's smart. He doesn't want to set it off because he knows the noise will just attract more infected. But at this point, obviously, this particular infected is literally inches away from Iris's neck. So he goes ahead and pulls the trigger, which, of course, alerts all the other zombies to what's going on. So Luis and Iris and his wife are able to get away. Then we have the birthing scene, and then after the baby is born, we get this, like I said, the gigantic CG baby that still cries like a normal baby.
I called him Chris Griffin.
You might as well. I mean, shit.
Remember
Shaq,
that episode of Family Guy when
Oh, right.
Talking about Chris's birth, and he's like, woman gives birth to elephant baby.
Oh shit. Yeah, I'll go with that. But yeah, so yeah, after this big CG baby is born, but somehow is still crying like a normal human, Luis does end up succumbing to his injuries, and he unfortunately dies quietly. At the exact moment that Luis dies, our original infected is back on the scene. He somehow is able to follow, and these, the description said that these were intelligent infected, and they kind of are. I mean, they're able to use sound to kind of find their people. Not that they can't see or anything like that, but it's their hearing is obviously heightened while they're in this viral state. So. We actually get a great scene earlier in the film in a gym locker room where Iris is trying to traverse this locker room to get to where her daughter is hidden. And she ends up running into infected that she didn't know were in there because they're being just as quiet as she is for some reason. They're not necessarily sneaking around or anything, but they are, like, you can see they're making an effort to not make as much noise as your average shambling zombie, so... kudos there. But yeah, that turns into a very tense scene to the point where the scene ends with Iris just turning around and seeing a female infected literally playing with a tennis ball, like bouncing it on the ground like she remembers playing with it before. I thought that was a pretty cool scene. But then instantly, as soon as the infected turns around and sees Iris, all interest in the tennis ball goes right out the window. And she, of course, gives chase to Iris. At this point, Iris is on her way to the boiler room because that is where Luis told her that he had hidden her. So she is down in the boiler room. Unfortunately, when Iris gets down there, what she ends up finding is her daughter's cast. I forgot to mention that her daughter's arm was broken and she was wearing a cast throughout the film. When she gets down to the boiler room, she finds her daughter's cast ripped off, not ripped off like by an animal, but it literally looks like a doctor took it off because it looks like it was sliced up the middle. And then she's frantic looking for her daughter. And then what does she see? She sees the body of a little girl inside the furnace. And we get what is probably the most emotional scene in the movie. This scene actually hits because we've spent time with Iris. It wasn't like The Husband where, we spent all of 3 minutes with him and then he dies and I'm supposed to feel something. No. We get a very emotional scene where it's actually even shot really well, where mom is screaming, but we don't hear it. It's that cool effect where, she's just screaming, into the ether, but all we hear is score. All we hear is the score playing. I really like when they do death scenes like that. I don't need to hear another person crying on film ever again, but, I'm sure that'll happen. So whatever. And this is where I start to dislike the movie, not because they perceived to have killed Iris. Excuse me, not Iris, but the daughter, Miriam.
Yeah.
But literally right after that big emotional breakdown of her, pretty much mourning her daughter's death and then trying to figure out, holy shit, did Luis actually kill my daughter? Because that's what a lot of us were thinking as we're watching the film. And no, literally right after that scene, she ends up finding her daughter in another part of the building. Apparently, one of the infected had gotten into the boiler room, so the daughter decided to run off to a different part of the building. And then she finds her, and we get this big, climactic reunion scene, and it's like, yeah. I think that's cheap. I mean, because you got me to actually feel something for what was perceived to be Miriam's death. And then suddenly she's back alive, and I'm just supposed to forget what I experienced in the last scene. It's like, nah, that's fucked up, guys. I understand you got to throw a swerve in there in movies every now and again to keep people interested, but that's kind of a dirty one right there. To make me feel something for this little girl that we just spent the last, hour to an hour and a half with, and then 30 seconds later to find out, oh, that wasn't actually her, and then to get no explanation of who that little girl was. Who the fuck was that little girl?
I actually caught on earlier. They do show one of the early scenes. They show that there is a guy sneaking into the compound with his daughter.
Right. Yeah, I remember that. But
yeah,
it's not Luis, so it's like, where's the guy? It's one of those things where they just, they put an idea in your head, and then they don't finish it. They don't complete the idea, and you're kind of left hanging as the viewer. Because I had a few questions like that by the end of the movie, like, where's this guy? Or wait, what happened here? Or, we'll get to it anyway. So yeah, Iris and Miriam are reunited. They go to try to get out, and that's when they find Luis and the baby. The baby's still alive. Luis is dead. And at the same time, as I mentioned, our main infected finds them, and we get basically Iris starts to explain to her daughter, what she needs to do. And here is again where we kind of get a little bit more reveal about the title of the movie. What happens is after one of these infected has a kill, after they kill someone, they basically just stand still or sit still for 32 seconds, exactly 32 seconds. I don't know if this is a cool down period, like did they overheat and they have to cool down for 32 seconds?
They're like Shin Godzilla?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't sure if it was an orgasm. At first I actually thought it was mourning. Like because the first time we see it is with the cat kill. And we see that infected kind of just sit there on his knees, kneeling, staring down at the cat. And I started to think, wait a minute, is this guy mourning? Is it the kind of thing where they can't control what they're doing, but they are aware of what they're doing, kind of like the Cured once again? As it turns out, nope, that's not the case. Through her genius investigation skills, Iris, through the use of security cameras with timestamps, they've got the time code at the bottom of the screen. Through the use of that, she is the one who's able to figure out that the infected have a 32-second cooldown period, if you will, that you literally can walk right by them, to the point that the infected are still cognizant. Like they'll look at you as you're walking by them, but for those 32 seconds, they don't do anything. Like I said, it seems like it's some kind of cooldown period, whatever the case may be. Maybe that's how long it takes for them to get over the ecstasy of a kill. Who the hell knows? Again, no explanation, so it's up to the viewer. You make up your own reason. I'm going to go with orgasm.
Quick question.
What's up?
Do you think when they stop, do you think Simon and Garfunkel, The Sounds of Silence, plays in all the zombies' heads?
Only 32 seconds of it, though? God damn, that's a good song.
My old friend.
I'd want more than 32 seconds, but yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, so hence the title of our movie. So back to our climactic final scene. Our main antagonist, infected, has caught up to Iris and his daughter. Iris explains as quickly as she can to Iris, look, I want you to turn around and close your eyes. And as soon as you stop hearing any noise, turn around and run out of here. Don't look at anything. Don't do anything. Just run. This is where my frustration starts to come in, folks, because there's a scene earlier in the film where Iris has already figured out the whole 32-second thing. But she still, with her daughter in tow, still decides to tiptoe past a hallway full of these infected who just took out a bunch of rats. Basically, Iris had released a bunch of rats that were trapped in one of the offices. The hallway was filled with infected. They all go and attack the rats, and then they have their 32-second cooldown. And folks, I don't know about you, but if I only have 32 seconds to get through a hallway of zombies, I'm fucking hauling ass. I'm not tiptoeing and looking at them and making eye contact with every fucking one. Let me tell you, it was the longest 32 seconds ever. I should have timed it, actually, because there's no way. She actually had a cell phone with her with a timer on it. And I'm just like, no. Like 30 seconds of movie would go by, but only 4 seconds on the timer would go by. It was a bit much. But like I said, they're trying to drag out the tension. I understand that. What I don't understand is the decision to fucking take your time getting through this horde of zombies when you only have 32 seconds. It doesn't make sense. And also, Iris is a weapon dropper. That makes total sense after you watch the movie and realize all the mistakes that Iris has made through this movie. Not only once, but twice, my friends. She gets the upper hand on an infected with a lead pipe, and on both occasions, one very early in the film and then one later in the film, she just drops the pipe and continues running. Of course, Mr. Venom screaming at the screen at this point. But the thing is, she's not the only weapon dropper. Luis actually did it at one point in the film too, where he was able to take out one of the infected with like some kind of blunt object. I don't remember exactly what. And then instantly he drops the weapon. It's like, what is wrong with these people? Like, they don't seem to understand the world that they're living in at this point. I know it's new. You know, the outbreak just started, but for fuck's sake, stop dropping your goddamn weapons. Anyway, back to our climax. After Iris explains to Miriam what she needs to do, after you stop hearing noise, run out of here. Iris then goes and actually confronts the infected, and they get into a fight, like an actual like fist fight. Unfortunately, Iris is not able to hold her own, and the infected kind of gets the advantage, gets the upper hand fairly.
Oh, it's like the Undertaker fighting John Cena.
Yeah, you could go with that. Undertaker fighting Shawn Michaels. Anyway, basically, as expected, the infected does get the upper hand and just beats the living shit out of Iris to the point where we think she's dead. Mind you that these infected people, they're not flesh eaters. They're not eating flesh. They literally just attack the living and then move on to their next kill. That's literally all they live for at this point. So what happens is we see it in slow motion too. They really drag out this beating. But yeah, we basically see in the background, while the camera is fixated on Miriam, in the background we see the main infected, just beating the living hell out of Iris over and over and over again until finally he's completely spent, and now starts the 32 seconds. Now, again, Miriam, the daughter, once she hears the noise stop, she does just like her mother says. She gets up, takes her hands off her ears, but then she starts to walk out, and then she sees her mother on the ground, just covered in blood. And as it turns out, Iris is not dead yet. She's had the shit beat out of her, but she ain't dead yet. And then they start a goddamn conversation. Literally, with 32 seconds to get out of this fucking room, Iris and her daughter literally start a conversation of, no, you gotta run, you gotta go. Stop talking, just go. Iris over and over again telling her daughter to go, and I understand her daughter is like 10 years old. She's a little kid. I fucking understand this, but god damn it, how serious does a situation have to get before a kid just turns around and fucking runs? For God's sakes, run! Whatever. Okay. So obviously the timer is running out. We see like Iris's phone. She's not actually holding it, but we see kind of the image of it and the timer running down. And the little girl, instead of running, decides to pick up a nail gun, which at first I thought was a staple gun. I'm thinking, what are you going to staple the fucking infected? That's not going to do shit to him. As it turns out, it was actually a very small nail gun. And literally just as the 32-second timer, of course, it's a movie. They're trying to build up the tension. Literally as the 32-second timer expires, Iris pulls the trigger and kills our main antagonist.
You mean Miriam?
Yep. And guess what, folks? That's the fucking end of our movie. All we get after that is a scene of Iris and Miriam just kind of walking out of the building. And it's like, well, wait a minute. This city is fucking bombarded with a horde of these infected, but they killed the one infected that was chasing them, and the movie's over. And I'm just like, okay. I guess that's one way to end it.
Yeah.
That's literally it, folks. I love the final fight, that whole final sequence between Iris and our main infected. I thought that was all great. But then, all the frustration with, dilly-dallying when you've only got 32 seconds. And the second time, like I said, since Miriam had the wherewithal to pick up the nail gun and kill the infected guy, I'll give her a little bit of credit for that one, but the hallway scene still frustrates the shit out of me. Nothing will ever defend Iris's decision to fucking tiptoe through that hallway, literally with like a dozen infected guys in there. But whatever.
You forgot the most important part of the ending, though.
What's that?
The zombie learns to swim.
Oh, that's right. It's not really a post-credit scene. It's right before the credits start. But yeah, the camera goes back to the original zombie that drowned when Luis and Iris first met. And the camera is just kind of zooming in on him. Obviously, it's a horror movie, so we know something has to happen. And then, yeah, the zombie literally twitches, and he looks like he starts to swim towards the edge of the pool. And then that's the end of our movie, closing credits.
So they're not safe in the boats.
So they're not even safe in the boats. And honestly, that final shot of the entire city, that kind of overflow, that, once again, another drone shot of the city to end the movie, shows the harbor basically on fire. Like, it does show that a few of the boats were able to get out and are pulling away, but we see like a couple of bigger boats, like a cruise liner or whatever, that's actually like on fire, and we see people running around the docks. So it seems like everybody had that brilliant idea of, using the water to try to avoid these things. But as the end of the movie shows, they're probably fucked anyway. And that's the way a zombie movie should end. No hope at all. Because that's what would happen. Zombie movies with happy endings just don't work for me. And though this one does have a happy ending in the sense that Iris and Miriam are reunited and they are able to get out of that building, they still have to deal with an entire city full of, infected maniacs. So it's just a weird choice to end the movie there. It's like, oh, okay, you killed the one main infected, but it's over. Yeah. Whatever. I mean, I'm not going to bitch too much, but I am going to bitch because this was a good movie. And like I said, if they had maybe tacked on another 5 minutes, like maybe an epitaph scene of some kind, either years later or maybe just later that day, just something. It just feels unfinished to see Iris and Miriam just kind of walking down the street. And mind you, this is after Iris got the living hell beat out of her by that infected guy. I'm trying really hard not to say zombie, but it keeps slipping out, so whatever. But yeah, folks, that's it. That's Virus 32.
And they have a
movie,
baby.
But
yeah,
I mean, a good movie, but one that no one will probably be talking about after next week, unfortunately. Unfortunately for them.
You never know.
I mean, you never know. There's definitely an audience for this movie, the kind of slower paced zombie movie that's not a gore fest. There is a market for this. I'm sure there's a lot of people that like this movie. Hell, there's going to be a lot of people that like this movie more than The Sadness, and more power to them if that's the case. But yeah, I'll save it for next week, folks. I'm chomping at the bit to talk about that movie, but I'll do the responsible thing and wait.
I know it's really tough to not just want to say The Sadness did this better, Sadness did this better, but
kinda, yeah. I don't want to disrespect this movie like that, but ultimately that is the truth. Like I said, the fact that The Sadness came out last year, maybe even 2020 for a festival run, and then here in 2022 we've got what looks like a discount version of that film, this time in Spanish instead of Korean. So yeah, go figure. But still watchable. I still do recommend it, folks. If you're still with us and you haven't seen this, I would still recommend it. It sounds like all of us do.
Yeah, I don't think the flaws are really that detrimental or that crippling, but it's just one of those where the main thing that I find with this one is just, the phrase, The Sadness did it better. And that's unfortunate that, that's the main thing I have with it. Is that, yeah, there's some great action in here. There's some great set pieces, but yeah, there's better scenes in The Sadness. And, like I was saying earlier, they're comparable. They look comparable. So you can say that there's probably, at least close enough in, budgetary wise to say that because of that, I think The Sadness just does it so much better that it just kind of leaves this one just in the dust kind of.
Yep. Unfortunately, that is the case. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even say just The Sadness. Most.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. 28 days later. I mean, even, I hate to say it, but even World War Z, and I fucking hate World War Z because of how much I love the book. I can't stand that movie. That I try not to even acknowledge that movie exists, but even that movie kind of did this concept a little bit better, at least on a bigger scale.
I wouldn't go that far.
I mean, yeah, I know, but it was a big Hollywood movie. It did look really nice, even though I didn't like the story.
Oh, and yeah, the CGI and zombies were great.
There were a couple of those shots that I thought were really cool. I'm not the biggest fan of CG, but how else are you going to do 10,000 zombies, climbing a 100-foot wall? CG is going to be pretty much your only option. But yeah, get ready for next week, folks. That's all we can say. Watch this movie because after next week, you probably won't want to.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this movie discussion and episode, but let's find out what we got from everybody else. So, Venom, where can people hear you?
All right. So it looks like we'll have the main show recording this coming Sunday. That is episode, 46? 46 or 47, somewhere in that range.
700.
Yeah, I wish.
Other way Mike works,
And for this episode, these are going to be my picks, and I decided to look at a couple of spring break horror films. Yes, I know it's May and spring break is in March, but it's my show, so shut up. And we are, of course, going to be looking at 2009's The Ruins and 2010's Atrocious out of Spain, definitely a lesser known found footage horror film out of Spain. It's not Wreck by any stretch of the imagination, but it's set during spring break, so it kind of fits my criteria. So yeah, we'll be looking at that on the next episode of the main show. On the next episode of Creature Comforts, which we'll actually record the following Sunday after that, or potentially this weekend, we'll have to see. We're going to be looking at Cloverfield. Yeah, a look at a big theatrical release that actually made a lot of money and actually got a lot of critical praise and fan praise as well. So that's going to be a good episode, and we'll actually have a guest for that. I'll let Derek announce who our guest will be for that one, since he was the one who kind of set that appearance up. And that's about it from me, unfortunately, guys. Not a whole lot of podcasting going on in my world. Who'd have thought, man? 4 years ago, I was on like double-digit shows, and now I'm struggling to find more stuff to talk about. Go figure.
All right. How about you, Dawn?
As mentioned, we are looking forward to Creature Comforts, just because I'm finally going to shit on a film that I've been dying to shit on for a while. Yeah, be prepared. I'll say that. As for my main show, Horror Countdown Podcast, our latest episode, we did our first director retrospective, and who better to do that with than Dario Argento. So me and Suzanne from NFW, we got together and did our top 10 favorite Dario Argento films. So that was an absolute blast, and had a lot of fun with that. And then to continue the Argento-a-thon that we had with that, I can finally say, after almost 2 months of promoting and sharing it out loud, it's finally available. My appearance on the House That Screams podcast, we finally were able to record our episode looking at the original Suspiria, which we had a lot of fun with that one. You can find that on pretty much all platforms. I think they're like me; they have their show everywhere. So go ahead and look that out. I think there's been an episode in between, just because it was released just after we recorded last week's show. So mine was like, I think the next day, so I didn't have a chance to really say anything about it because I didn't know the release schedule. And then by the time you hear this, there's going to be another episode. There should be like another episode or two in there. So if you want to go ahead and find that out. But I think that's it for me. I think I've just got a couple of extra recordings this month. So I think that's pretty much it.
All right, Derek, let everybody know where they can hear you right now.
Right now, the only thing I have out is the Cinema Attack episode that actually just dropped today, where we looked at the ritual and no one gets out alive. And, looking forward to recording Creature Comforts. I think I'll leave the suspense of the guest. Just for now. We'll suspend it. Get the suspense going.
I like it.
I'm just going to leave you off with this, listeners. Oh, yeah. Jake the Snake.
Nice. All right. I guess if it goes to me, I really have nothing. So yeah, just keep tuning in for Fresh Cuts and the main show. So yeah, if you haven't figured out by now, we're doing the sadness next week. Actually, all of May is pretty much scheduled in already, just because of timing with theatrical releases, and we have 3 episodes left. So other than sadness, there's 2 movies coming out in theaters to take up the rest of the month. So yeah, so and then we'll look forward to previewing, I guess, the June schedule once it gets closer. But I think that's it. So with that said, we're gonna get out of here. We will be back next week with our next episode on the sadness. So, and yeah, it will be on Shudder before we record. So I highly advise everybody checking it out. I think on the 12th it lands, and that's 3 days. Probably by the time you're hearing this, 2 days away. So check it out. It's not that long of a movie either, so it should be a quick watch to fit in.
Will be 32 seconds though.
A tad longer than that, but for good reason. So
Yes, quite.
Yep. All right. So thanks everybody for listening. We will catch you next time. Let's say bye to the listeners.
Later.
Bye.
And once again, ladies, if he says he's a good guy, he absolutely is not. So you run. Just fucking run.
Peace.